Good morning and welcome to this year's Mayor's Interfaith Prayer Breakfast. This is the 36th of these annual gatherings, sponsored by the Mayor's Office and the Faith Coalition of Lancaster County. Through these years, we have gathered as a community to recognize and honor the amazing diversity of religious traditions in Lincoln. Many faith communities are part of the fabric of our city, and our life together is much the richer for it. Of course, this year is different. Like communities around the world, we are living the reality of widespread illness as the COVID-19 pandemic spreads across every nation. Even while we huddle in our homes, keeping our social distance, we recognize even more the need to connect with others, the need to break through the isolation and build a community in which we honor each other, care for each other, and encourage each other. And so, even though we aren't sitting around tables together in one room, we are here together online. Thank you for being part of this gathering. Thank you to Nipun Mehta for joining us. You'll meet him later, and we look forward to hearing from him. Thank you to Mayor Larry and Gaylor Baird for supporting this event and being with us today. Thank you to the planning committee who worked hard to re-envision this event and make it possible. Imam Jamal Rahman tells an old story of two people, one lame and the other blind, who were invited to the king's banquet. Both of them despaired of going. The journey was too long and difficult for the lame one, and the blind one would not be able to find the way. When they lamented their difficulty at a community gathering, the mullah came up with a creative solution. The lame one could piggyback on the blind one and use his eyes to guide his strong companion. Because of community input and their mutual cooperation, both of them were able to attend the banquet. We find ourselves together in such a time today. None of us will be able to make it through these perilous times alone, but together we will carry through and carry each other through. So today, we take time to listen to readings and prayers, hear an inspiring message from our speaker, Nipun Mehta, and then together may we work for the day when all we do and say in our own lives and in our life together will be blessing and compassion and peace.
Good morning. My name is Terry Appleby. I'm the rabbi at Congregation B'nai Jeshurun here in Lincoln. In the midst of this new modern plague, I think we need to remember to be compassionate, not only towards others, but also toward ourselves. And so I'd like to share this prayer with you. As I breathe, may I receive. May I be surrounded in the protective glow of divine light. May I allow myself to feel and absorb this divine presence. As I breathe, may I receive. May I awaken within me the force of my vitality and the strength of my own will. As I breathe, may I receive. May my willingness to believe in my own well-being be enhanced, embellished, and enriched. May my faith in my own healing powers be renewed. As I breathe, may I receive. May I cherish and love myself for who I really am, weak and strong, selfish and selfless, learner and teacher, prideful and humble, believer and non-believer. As I breathe, may I receive. May this love for self merge with God's love and with the love of all humanity. As I breathe, may I receive. May I feel this love, acknowledge it, and take it in, knowing and recognizing that love and God's presence is always there. As I breathe, may I receive. As I breathe, may I receive.
Our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, who are truly present in your people, we recognize your presence with us right now during this prayer breakfast. And we take this time to simply say thank you. Thank you for the gift of our lives, the gift of our families, the gifts of speech and debate, the gifts of democracy and discernment, and the gift of action. We take this time to thank you for our beautiful city of Lincoln and our state of Nebraska, her peaceful prairie plains from Rulo to Rushville, from Kimball to Clark, and all points in between. We thank you for her majestic sunsets, her soils and her water, her plants and her wildlife, that provide enjoyment and solace for us and give unfading glory to you. We thank you for the gift of work, the gift of our economy, the gift of agriculture, the gifts of education, commerce, and tourism, the gifts of technology and trade. Give us a favorable growing season and a vibrant economy for the well-being of our state. And we pray for the people of our Nebraska, the working man and working woman, the mother and the father, the employer and the employee, the farmer, the widowed and the aged, the young family, the single parent, the single person, the poor and the rich, the teacher and the student, the child. Be with them all in their joys and happiness, and be also with them in their pains and their strife. Help us to see each person with compassion and innate dignity in which all are owed. We pray for our enemies and for those who seek to disrupt and destroy our way of life. Allow them to see that we are a people who desire that all live in peace, and each has the right to pursue true, good, and unitive happiness. And we pray for our mayor, our city council, our city, and all of our leaders, their staffs, and all of those who have a part in the governing process. May these men and women who are entrusted with the humbling task of ultimately sharing in your supreme authority be given the wisdom to discern and the strength of volition to employ your will in our beloved community. Make all of us compassionate people, willing to build each other up and elevate the common good. You who are the author of hearts, grow compassion and love in our hearts, so that we may live in joy and peace in this capital city of Lincoln. We ask this in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, who along with you and the Holy Spirit remain one God forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning. This is Farida Ibrahim with the Muslim community of Lincoln. Today I'd like to share with you a hadith or saying of Prophet Muhammad, followed by verses which was inspired by these words by the great poet Sadi. The hadith goes, believers in their affection, mercy, and compassion for each other is that of a body. When one limb aches, the rest of the body reacts with sleeplessness and fever. بنی آدم اعضای یکدیگرند که در آفرینش یک جوهرند. چه عضوی به درد آورد روزگار، دیگر عضوها را نماند قرار. تو که از محنت دیگران بیغمی، نشاید که نامد مهند آدمی. Human beings are limbs of one body indeed, for they are created from the same soul and seed. When one limb is afflicted with pain, other limbs will feel the pain. He who has no sympathy for human suffering, it is not worthy of being called a human being. The Persian lyrics of this poem has been woven on a Persian rug, and it is on display at the United Nations. Thank you.
This is a selection from the writings of Abdul Baha, son of the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. Praise be to God! Baha'u'llah hath lifted the chains from off the necks of humankind, and hath set man free from all that trammelled him, and told him, Ye are the fruits of one tree, and the leaves of one branch. Be ye compassionate and kind to all the human race. Deal ye with strangers the same as with friends. Cherish ye others just as ye would your own. See foes as friends, see demons as angels. Give to the tyrant the same great love ye show the loyal and true. And even as gazelles from the scented cities of Kata and Kutan offer up sweet musk to the ravening wolf, be ye a refuge to the fearful. Bring ye rest and peace to the disturbed. Make ye a provision for the destitute. Be a treasury of riches for the poor. Be a healing medicine for those who suffer pain. Be ye doctor and nurse to the ailing. Promote ye friendship and honor and conciliation and devotion to God in this world of non-existence.
Namaskar. Compassion in Hinduism. Written in praise of the compassionate Lord Vishnu, here is a shlok or a verse from Vishnu Sahasranam, a piece of devotional literature in Hinduism. Shantakaram bhujagshayanam padmanabham suresham Vishwadharam gaganasadrishyam meghavarna shubhanganam Lakshmikantam kamalanayanam yogibhirdhyan gamayam Vande Vishnu bhavabhayaharam sarvalokaeknatham. Of the three Hindu gods, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiv, the most compassionate is Lord Vishnu. He is the sustainer of the universe, and Vaishnavites, who form a distinct sect within Hinduism, worship him as the personification of love. Hindus believe compassion and forgiveness motivate him to incarnate at various times to restore the balance of the universe. According to Hindus, Gautam Buddha, the embodiment of compassion, was his most recent incarnation. Compassion is one of the 12 most important virtues in Hinduism and thrives in a person who rises above their selfishness and who finds enough virtue in others to appreciate them and understand them. Thank you.
I'm honored to be a part of the Mayor's Breakfast today. I wanted to share a couple scripture texts for you from the Bible. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 says, "Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, and love one another. Be compassionate and humble." That's wise counsel for always, but especially for times like today. And 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, the Apostle Paul writes, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort that we ourselves receive from God." Paul talks about sharing the blessing. As we receive comfort and compassion, may we share comfort and compassion to those who are in need. Our world needs this now more than ever.
Jesus told this story. A man was going down the road from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down that same road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a seminary professor, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But along came one of those other people. You know the ones, those dangerous people, the untrustworthy kind of people. Those kind of people that when they're not being lazy are prone to violence. They spread defilement of all sorts, and they distort the law of God. I would never want to even sit and have lunch with one of those people. Ugh. One of those people came down the road, and he came near the hurt man. And when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out money, gave it to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these three, do you think, was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The one listening to Jesus said, "The one who showed him compassion." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise."
When Mayor Larian Gaylor Baird took office in May of 2019, she began reaching out to all sectors of the community with a vision of one Lincoln, Lincoln Forward, and Resilient Lincoln. In the months since, she has worked hard to lead the city in equity, diversity, and inclusion, in economic well-being and community development, and in mitigating the effects of climate change. And then the coronavirus pandemic struck. In these last weeks, she has been called on to lead the community in a crisis we've not experienced in our lifetimes. In weekly and now daily press conferences, she has taught us how to wash our hands and keep a safe distance. She has given us sobering facts and reassured us that we as a community will come through this time. She has brought us reliable information from medical experts, counselors, educators, and many others. She continues to reach out to many different populations and regularly reminds us of the especially difficult challenges that many of our neighbors face, such as domestic violence and mental health issues. Through it all, she has been a calm presence that embodies compassion and sets an example for those she leads. Mayor Gaylor Baird, thank you for supporting this prayer breakfast for many years, and thank you now for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Griffith, and thank you to all of you faith leaders for those beautiful verses and blessings. I want to thank the Faith Coalition of Lancaster County and the Mayor's Interfaith Prayer Breakfast Committee for carrying on with this event despite these unusual times in which we find ourselves. And I certainly never imagined when I became mayor that my first Interfaith Prayer Breakfast would occur virtually through Zoom and Facebook Live in the midst of a global pandemic. And yet, I'm so grateful to the Faith Coalition in cooperation with the local Lincoln-based leaders of Service Space, and especially Prita Bonsall, who came together to ensure that this event would carry on. It's certainly a welcome reminder that the human spirit finds ways to first improvise and then triumph over whatever is thrown at us. Thank you so much for helping to provide a source of stability and hope in these turbulent times. And I also want to thank Carla Engstrom for being here to help make sure that our message is available to more residents of our community. The world, including our corner of it here in the Heartland, is in the midst of a great challenge. The coronavirus pandemic has had and certainly will continue to have a profound impact on people's lives and livelihoods. People are struggling in ways they may not have struggled before, and in ways that may not always be visible to the rest of us. Our jobs, our economy, our food supply, our homes, our physical and mental health, all of these things suddenly seem so fragile and impermanent. There's really only one other time in my life where I felt anything close to this. When I was 8 months pregnant with my first daughter and living in San Francisco, an earthquake struck, and the concrete beneath my feet, which had always seemed so solid and permanent, suddenly quivered like liquid. And in that moment, which probably lasted only a handful of seconds, I awakened to a new reality that the earth that I had trusted for my foundation and the life in my belly that represented hope for my future were fragile in ways I had never even contemplated. I feel that again now, and much more profoundly. Yet I also feel, and maybe you do too, that there is opportunity in the midst of this challenge, opportunity to transform ourselves and to transform our corner of the world for the better. This is a rare moment, to be sure. We've suffered economic downturns and public health crises before, but we haven't endured something like a great pause, a shutdown of large parts of the economy and public life in recent memory. I believe that in time, we could emerge from this great pause with greater compassion and a greater connection to one another than before, that we might come to view this period as the source of our collective renewal, the pain before our rebirth as a community. And as I see it, there are two keys to this collective renewal or rebirth. And the first has to do with uncovering and tapping into the enormous wells of compassion that are already within us. And the second has to do with strengthening the bonds that tie us together so that we may emerge from this period as a more socially connected and resilient community. Most of us don't realize how deep our wells of compassion and love truly are, but there are times in our life when we're reminded of that depth, when we're reminded of our true nature. And those are the times when we're called to harness something within us that is powerful beyond measure in service to others. Many experience this calling when they become a parent or when they're called to comfort a loved one near the end of life. We've all witnessed an extraordinary outpouring of love and compassion in our community over these past few weeks. There were the musicians who put on folk music concerts outside senior living centers, or the teachers at SCO Middle School who made a video to let their students know how much they miss them. The tattoo parlor that donated 50,000 gloves to hospitals and our health department, or the people who cheered on the newlyweds by honking their car horns and collectively celebrating from a safe distance. Then there were those volunteers who collected toys and arts and crafts for the children at St. Monica's, and countless other such instances of love and compassion in our community. Some might say that such instinctive ability to jump into service to others must be carefully cultivated over a number of years, that it's not just built into us, especially when it comes to serving people outside our immediate families. And others might even say that it doesn't really exist because humans are ultimately self-serving. Well, research shows that both of these sentiments are not the true story. At a very young age, children are predisposed to comfort, to share, to cooperate without reward or personal attachment. And even when we're older, studies show that our first instinct or intuitive response is to benefit the common good rather than ourselves. It's really only when we're allowed to reflect before making a decision that we may engage in more purely self-interested behavior. And I'll leave it to the ministers and the philosophers to explain why it is that sometimes we forget our true compassionate nature, or why we lead divided lives, as renowned Quaker educator Parker Palmer puts it. Parker Palmer would say that there are forces that cause a rift to develop between our inner self, which is intuitively loving and service-oriented, and our outer persona, which can be more self-conscious and self-serving. This outer persona can get caught up in the busyness of the day and in pursuits that don't enrich or enliven the inner self. The divided life can take a number of different forms, whether it's refusing to fully invest in one's work, or remaining in environments that erode the spirit, concealing true feelings for fear of causing conflict, or avoiding real relationships with people. The silver lining of this great pause is that it's giving us time to re-examine and ultimately seek to integrate our divided lives. It's allowing us to take a break from those outer personas that don't bring us joy or fulfillment. It's reminding us of who we truly are, which is loving and compassionate beyond all measure. And one need look no further to the healthcare professionals tirelessly serving those afflicted with COVID-19, notwithstanding great personal risk, or the children making artwork for our homebound seniors, or the businesses that are revamping their entire operations to produce personal protective equipment, or PPE, at no cost. The neighbors enjoying socially distant dance parties in their driveways, the volunteers working around the clock to ensure that everyone who needs food gets it, and the families that are bonding in new ways that they've never done before across generations. By giving us the space to integrate our inner and outer lives, and by giving us the opportunity to tap into and reveal the wells of compassion already deep within us, this period of time has the potential to be profoundly transformative on a personal level. For this transformation to lead to renewal and rebirth, we must continue to draw on the wells of compassion long after COVID-19, and we must be mindful of what we want to put back into our lives after the pause is over. I invite you all to share stories about the love and compassion and service you've witnessed or experienced in the community by emailing those stories to mayor@lincoln.ne.gov. Our hope is that by amplifying these stories, others might be inspired to more deeply channel and tap into their own deep wells of compassion. The other opportunity we have with the Great Pause goes to the heart of what it means to live in a thriving community and a thriving democracy. When Alexis de Tocqueville visited the United States in the 1830s, He attributed the United States' success as a democracy to the strength of our social ties. He said, quote, "Americans of all ages, all stations in life, and all types of disposition are forever forming associations. There are not only commercial and industrial associations, but others of 1,000 different types: religious, moral, serious, futile, very general, and very limited, immensely large, and very minute," unquote. De Tocqueville's early view of the true strength of this country and the importance of social ties has been validated. Extensive research shows that the success and resilience of a community and the happiness and well-being of the residents within it can be measured by the strength of its residents' social connections. Unfortunately, as Robert Putnam documented in his famous book, Bowling Alone, the United States has experienced a significant decline in social connectedness since the 1970s, as evidenced by declining civic participation, declining volunteerism, declining participation in social activities, and declining trust in one another. It's gotten so bad, Putnam noted, that people are literally bowling alone. So as strange as it may seem, we've been presented with an opportunity in the midst of this time of physical distancing to reverse the trend of social isolation and to strengthen our bonds with one another. If there's anything this virus has revealed to us, it's how interconnected we truly are. And it is precisely that interconnectedness that will see us through to the end of this crisis and shield us from future shocks. The government will not be the solution to this crisis. The government cannot possibly make everyone who's been impacted by this public health emergency whole. The best support people can find is in each other. The social stimulus is as, if not more, important than the economic stimulus. And it's our role in the government to support the community in rediscovering its true source of strength. Despite the physical distancing, or perhaps because of it, we are starting to witness a social rebirth. We're seeing a greater amount of volunteering, a greater amount of communication among families and neighbors, and a greater reliance on networks of friends, nonprofits, and associations. Once superficial calls and texts have now become imbued with meaning and depth. You know, as a new mayor, Reverend Griffith alluded to this, I was in the midst of a community listening tour. The pandemic has turbocharged that outreach effort and helped dispense of any old walls that may have stood in the way. Everywhere I turn, every Zoom meeting I join, every call I make, to social service organizations, small businesses, big businesses, houses of worship, cultural centers, renters, landlords, bankers, neighbors, and more. People are talking about how they can help and be helped in a mutuality of need and support on a scale never before witnessed or experienced. And the free flow of kind and encouraging words, "How are you doing today? What can I do to help you? Oh, I can take that on. Yes, I will join that effort. How else could we make this work?" These are the things I'm hearing. These are real examples and so heartening as we recognize how much we truly need to work together to get through this moment. And one way in which we here in City Hall are trying to support greater social connectedness is by pairing individuals who are homebound and who are seeking additional support, whether that's physical support like running errands or the support of a friend, with healthy volunteers in the community. And this program, called NeighborLink, will be launched next week. Our goal is for the individuals in this program to form long-term, meaningful relationships that last long beyond the bounds of this crisis. And as the beautiful readings this morning remind us, at the root of all the world's sacred traditions is a call for compassion and love. These times certainly underscore that what unites us is far greater than what divides us. We are one people breathing the same air. We are one global economy. We are one planet, sharing our precious home with all living beings. What affects one affects us all, regardless of what temporary walls or boundaries may have been erected in the past. These times are a call for us to recollect our deep interdependence with one another, while at the same time building our own local resilience and capacity. In walking this critical path, we can either see ourselves as members of the human species, universally vulnerable in the way we share pathogens, or we can recognize ourselves as members of humankind, uniquely strong in our capacity to share love and compassion. This is our time to determine who we choose to be. Thank you.
Prayer breakfast for 2020. My name is Max Perry Mueller, and I'm a professor of religious studies at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm coming to you on this beautiful sunny day from the Dairy Store on East Campus. Truly a place of interfaith gathering, if there was one on our beautiful campus. I want to share with you this morning a bit about a class that directly engages in interfaith work that I'm teaching this spring. It's called When the World's Religions Came to Lincoln. It's a study of about how in the last century or so, how immigrants from Europe came to Lincoln and brought their religious traditions, diverse religious traditions to Lincoln, and reshaped the landscape of our great city. And also it's a study of how in the more recent past and the present, immigrants from Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and other places have brought their religious traditions and also reshaped the religious landscape of our great city, and also added opportunities, increased opportunities for interfaith knowledge and also interfaith service and work. And I'm so excited that some of my students with whom I've been honored to engage in this work are going to share some of their insights about interfaith work. And I'll let them introduce themselves here. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Hi, my name is Abby Tramer, and I'm a freshman. I am majoring in chemistry and minoring in religious studies. Learning about interfaith has helped me to see the power of service in other faith traditions. Seeing how service helps people of other religions really created a spark in my life for service and allowed me to deepen my own faith.
Hi, I'm Dominic. I am a junior here at UNL. I'm a double major in philosophy and religious studies. And then to talk about interfaith work, learning about faith traditions, other than my own, it seems very important because it has helped broaden the fields of study that I work within. It helps me to kind of look at the deeper questions within my own faith traditions. And at first I was actually never on board with interfaith work until I kind of opened my mind. I read a lot of different texts. I know, for example, we are reading Interfaith Leadership by Eboo Patel, and I kind of translate all that into my other works within, like, for example, Christian extremism. So I think interfaith work is a very important aspect within our field of study.
Hello everyone, my name's Natalie Benoit and I'm a junior here at UNL, majoring in psychology. Through learning about interfaith work and exploring interfaith work, I have learned to deepen my own faith and spirituality. I find a lot of beauty in learning about others' traditions and what faith means to them, and I believe that doing so and seeing others' passions helps drive my passion even further and allows me to create great connections with others and just learn more about life and faith and spirituality, and I just think that's great.
Hi, I'm Ahmed. I'm a sophomore majoring in economics. Interfaith means to me trying to understand perspective of individuals about their religion and trying to relate with your own struggle.
Hi guys, my name is Maddie Weaver. I am a sophomore studying biological sciences at the University of Nebraska. I am currently at my home in Kansas City, where I have been afforded the opportunity to continue my interfaith work. Interfaith work has allowed me to dive deeper into my own faith. By being able to observe and learn about others' cultures and traditions, I have been able to reevaluate what my faith means to me.
Hi, my name is Ashna Gelett. I am a sophomore student majoring in global studies and minor religious studies at UNL. And firstly, I want to thank Professor Mueller for giving this chance to talk about interfaith work. And for me, interfaith means people from various traditions, cultures, belief systems coming together in order to understand one another. Most fundamentally, interfaith is to respect different traditions, different religions, different faiths. It means to understand and love others, the recognition of the oneness in all its diversity of expression. That is what I think interfaith is. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Pierce Bauer. I am a junior philosophy major at UNL, and interfaith to me really means interacting with faith outside of designated faith time. I guess I don't want to take the workaholic stance. Everyone needs breaks. But I think when we're practicing interfaith work, it's really about looking for the opportunities in every part of life where you can cross those both religious and cultural bridges to really connect with people. I think the world right now focuses a lot on people's differences, and I think those should be celebrated, but the universal humanity of religion and faith is something that should be at the forefront and really bring people together. And I don't think you need to have a specific time or place designated to doing that work. So thank you for listening to my take.
Hi, I'm Tessa Faust. I'm a fourth year Classics and Religious Studies student. Interfaith work is important to me because I went to Lincoln High, and at Lincoln High, things were really diverse, and so all my friends were from different backgrounds and different faiths than me. And so interfaith work just kind of means understanding my friends a bit closer and hoping that other people get the same experiences that I did.
Hi, my name is Joy Cargis, and I'm a senior at UNL, majoring in Global Studies with minors in Spanish and Religious Studies. I didn't know about the concept of interfaith work before this year, but now I think that it's so important. When different people of different faiths and cultural backgrounds can come together and work towards a shared goal, really amazing things can happen. Learning about other traditions has really deepened my own faith, as well as it has inspired me to take action to serve others in ways that I wouldn't have thought of before.
Hi, my name is Preeta Bansal, and it's my privilege to introduce today our featured speaker, Nipun Mehta. As many of you know, I grew up in Lincoln, went through K through 12 here in our remarkable public school system, and then had some incredible opportunities to serve as a senior lawyer in the White House, as a US diplomat, and in major corporate and academic institutions around the world. Of all the many roles and remarkable people I've encountered in so many public and private settings, none have so completely blown me away or so singularly confounded, challenged, and impressed me all at the same time as our speaker today. Nipun is the founder of ServiceSpace, an organization and global ecosystem fully run by volunteers with no paid staff and no fundraising. And yet ServiceSpace through Nipun has catalyzed a global ecosystem of community builders who are grounded in their localities and rooted in practices for cultivating love, nonviolence, selfless service, and compassion. The ecosystem has reached millions in hundreds of cities around the globe, attracted thousands of volunteers, and mushroomed into numerous community-based service projects. So many of us are now hunkering down in our homes and learning that physical distance does not necessarily have to equate with social or emotional distance through the skillful use of technology, and that we truly are interconnected, as the mayor said. We are discovering what Nipun divined and designed for more than 20 years ago when he founded ServiceSpace. But unlike other technologists who designed for commercial profit, he asked the question, what would love do? He understood that we could leverage both our inner capacities for love and compassion with the outer technology of the then burgeoning network technologies to ignite shifts in individual and collective consciousness. When Nipun founded ServiceSpace, he left his Silicon Valley technology job simply to serve others full-time. In the last 2 decades, he has quietly and humbly and behind the scenes created a vibrant global community of volunteers. The Dalai Lama recognized Nipun as an unsung hero of compassion, but he didn't remain unsung terribly long. President Obama appointed him to a Council of Poverty and Inequality in America in 2015, and a German magazine named him as one of the top 100 most inspiring people of 2018. He has addressed and catalyzed thousands of gatherings around the world, including major gatherings of industrialists and CEOs, philanthropists, and global changemakers. And although we regret that we can't host him in person as planned this fine snow-packed morning in Lincoln, Nebraska, we're honored that he was willing to join us at 5:30 a.m. his time from his home in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're also grateful that we were able, in the very early confusing days of this pandemic, to so quickly convert this breakfast into a virtual event. It's probably, I have to say, probably the first ever prayer breakfast that is BYOB, bring your own breakfast, in large part due to the tremendous heart and tech support of service space carried over by the city of Lincoln. So with that, I introduce to you Nipun, who is a dear friend, a close colleague, and someone from whom I learn immensely every single day.
Thank you, Prita. And thank you all for hosting such an inspiring gathering. And I can feel the inspiration even virtually. I want to talk a little bit about building compassionate communities. We live in unprecedented times, and that uncertainty very clearly brings up a lot of fear. But I think there's the fear that keeps us alive, and then there's the fear that keeps us from living. And I think as we tap into the latter, it becomes a gateway to great compassion, and that invariably leads to deeper social connections, as we've heard. So I want to start with a quote actually by Martin Luther King Jr. He says, "We're all tied in a single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And I think in times like these, it's so clear that this is invariably true. So from the last 20 years of service-based, we've seen this day in and day out. And I want to share with you some stories and some lessons that perhaps might be applicable in the work that you are doing locally and globally. So this is before I get into the heady part of it, because sometimes we can really start to intellectualize these ideas, but fundamentally they're very innate to us. We all know compassion. One of my friends, Jacob Needleman, who's also a remarkable author and has published so many books, but he was teaching a class at a university one time, a small class, and in this class he asked this question: "Wait, where did you learn to be good?" And everyone raises their hands and shares their anecdotes and insights. And then there's this one student who says, "I learned how to be good for my 5-year-old." And he describes this anecdote of how he had taken his 5-year-old to Mexico, where he's from, for Christmas one time. And Christmas Eve night at midnight, he got all his gifts. He was super excited. Come Christmas Day, there was a kid from the neighborhood slums that was walking past. And so the father thought that, I should make this a teaching moment for my 5-year-old. And so he tells him, "Son, you got all these toys yesterday. Why don't you share one of your toys with your neighbor?" And, of course, the 5-year-old is like, "No, Dad, I don't want to do this. I just got this. I haven't played enough with it," all these things. But eventually he sees that his dad is serious. And so he picks up one of these toys. But he was an enterprising kid, like perhaps many of us. And so what he decided to do is pick his least favorite toy. And so he picks this least favorite toy, and father sees this, and father says, "Son, no, not that one. Give him your favorite toy." And of course, the young kid is totally heartbroken. He throws a tantrum. He's like, "No, I can't give that away." And father, I kind of imagine this as a Lion King moment, Simba and Mufasa, like very compassionately, but very sternly, is saying, "No, you have to give up one of your toys." And so the son takes his favorite toy, and he's about to go, share it. And while he's doing that, the father is thinking, "Well, I should scheme up ways to support him and to encourage this kind of behavior. What should I do? Maybe I'll get him the same one." And he's thinking of all these different strategies. And lo and behold, the son comes back, and he's got a huge smile on his face. And he looks his dad in the eye and he says, "Dad, that was amazing. Can I do it again?" And this is really the fundamental sort of propensity that we have within us, to respond to generosity with even greater generosity, to respond to connection with this longing for even deeper connection. And a 5-year-old knows this, even younger kids know this. And so how do we start to create systems? How do we start to create a world in which this kind of intuitively known, this native impulse is encouraged? And so these were the questions that we were holding back in 1999 in the Silicon Valley, when the internet was just starting. But a few of us were thinking, how do we leverage the modern day tools and technologies to feed and encourage and amplify this kind of an impulse? So we had started Service Space in 1999 just to build websites for nonprofits. And then it started becoming a much bigger thing, and much to our surprise. There were just 4 of us that went to a homeless shelter, and we said we want to help, and they said, "Tell us how," and we said we don't know how. You got to remember these are like 20 somethings, and we ended up building them a website. This is back in 1999. They didn't even know what a website was. And that then led to so many other incredible different range of projects over the last 20 years, where we were trying to bridge the internet with the internet, something that is intrinsic to all of us. But there were a few sort of principles that Service Space had that were very curious at the time. They just felt right to us, so we stuck with it. But they ended up being extremely radical. Right? In that time, usually people start with a big idea, big money, and big offices. And so instead of a big idea, we thought, well, what if we just sort of start with small acts? And what we didn't realize at the time is that when small acts get connected, it actually creates this synergistic kind of intelligence and the synergistic capital, if you want to call it that. And instead of big money, we said, we're actually not going to fundraise. We're just going to serve. And as you serve, invariably, people are going to feel gratitude. And that gratitude may overflow. And people may contribute without any solicitation. And then we had, this, instead of like thinking about big offices, we thought, let's just do it as all volunteers. And initially you look at that and you say, okay, that's a lemonade stand. That sounds cute. But actually, if you have a field of people that are purely motivated by their intrinsic impulses, what scientists call intrinsic motivations, it becomes extremely powerful. And especially as a collective, it just has a very different field effect. And so I want to share, one of the things that actually really happened is that we inverted a lot of paradigms. And so I want to share some slides as I can share my screen here virtually. So what ended up happening is that we went from, the typical scenario is you start with impact, and then you have some projects that define that impact and facilitate that impact. Then you hire some people, and then you talk about values, right? Then you talk about things like compassion. But we thought that what if we flip it around and we just start with those values, and not just values in terms of articulation, but actually living it, practicing it. As Gandhi said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. And when we do that, we see that there's this magnetizing effect to those values. If I'm doing an act of kindness, invariably everyone around me wants to get involved. And so we started seeing that. And there were lots of people that joined. And as those people joined, we said, well, what should we do? And we're not just going to sit around and do nothing. So that started to come together very organically into projects. And those projects naturally had impact. But this completely flips the paradigm. And so what I want to share is, after 20 years of this sort of these experiments in this direction, what were some of the lessons? If you were to ask me, Nipun, what have you learned? I would leave you with these four sort of key principles, and I think all of these are also offer us a gateway into a very different paradigm of creating value. The first one is that everyone, I think, is good at something. When you work with volunteers, you have to start with this. And it sounds so simple and so human and so natural, and yet at the same time, we don't design for this. This is, there's a quote attributed to Einstein. I don't know if it's actually his quote or not, but everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to live its whole life believing it's stupid. And so how do we start with this idea that everyone is good at something? And for me, one of the greatest anecdotes that articulates this is actually from Mother Teresa. One of my friends was with her, and there was a big funder that had come to see her work. And at the end, we wanted a photo with Mother Teresa. And so they took a photo. But then the photo, they clicked and they said, the photo's not quite right. What should we do? And so they said, oh, Mother Teresa, can you move a little this way? And she did. And they clicked and they said, still not quite right, And they said, can you move your head back a little bit? And so she moved her head back. And watching this, my friend is furious. And how can you treat a global icon of compassion in this way? And but Mother Teresa was very patient and very loving, her usual self. And so they clicked again, and then this time, the photographer was so unhappy, or I don't know what the photographer is thinking, but he actually goes and moves Mother Teresa's face. And wow, how do you respond to that? But Mother Teresa didn't even bat an eye. She went with it, and after those guys left, my friend asked Mother Teresa, says, Mother, why didn't you say anything? That just didn't sound right. And Mother Teresa said one sentence that ended up changing her life, changing my friend's life. She says, my dear, there are multiple forms of poverty. That yes, the children that are left at my doorstep have a material kind of poverty. That's very legitimate as well. But there's also different kinds. There's emotional poverty. There's spiritual poverty. And there's a whole wide range of poverties. And what she points to is that not just that there are multiple forms of poverty, but there's actually multiple forms of wealth as well. There's multiple forms of capital. And so how do we, what are these different forms? What is community capital? What is nature capital? Especially in the times of the pandemic, we're seeing so much around, animals are everywhere, birds are chirping, the air quality is so much better. What is that nature capital? What is that attention capital? What does it mean to just hold space and listen to another person? What is technology capital? What is time capital? Volunteerism, something Sort of Space was so enmeshed in. And how do we amplify these forms of capital? This is my friend Firoz. He did something remarkable. He had a son who was autistic, and he was on the autism spectrum. And that inspired him to go and hire 5 people on the autism spectrum. But the way he did it was, he says, usually we hire people and he says, are you good at what I want you to be good at? But he says, well, what are people on the autism spectrum good at? And there are many parts of the spectrum where they don't lie, they're never late, they don't get bored. And he's like, wow, like I wish I had normal staff like that, And so he hired these people at SAP. And at that time, he was 36 and he was very, very successful. He had about 5,000 people working under him. And he started this little experiment and became so successful, it became a Harvard case study. I think the CEO of SAP has said that he wants 1% of his staff to be on the autism spectrum, and many others have taken that pledge. But this all starts with the idea that everyone is good at something. Right? And you can start to think about this in terms of payment. This is a Buddhist monk, and he said that I'm going to come out with a CD, but instead of money, you can offer acts of kindness. And we took that idea to another level when we hosted a conference. And instead of tickets, or we had tickets that you could buy with money, but we also had untickets, right? Where you could pay with community wealth by volunteering. You could pay with kindness wealth by doing acts of kindness. You could pay with creativity, where you could go and create a 5-minute selfie about the theme of the conference, or you could have silence capital, which is go out and meditate for 8 hours and share a story. So just lots of different ways in which we can tap into this. And Prita and I were on President Obama's council, and here's a quote that he had signed off on. You should remember that capital isn't just financial; it's also social, informational, experiential, spiritual, emotional. And I would add that just so many other forms. There's actually infinite forms of wealth. So this was sort of the first core insight. And the second one, I would say, that builds on this is not just that everyone is good at something, is that everyone can actually be great at giving. Right? They want to give their gifts. And we see so many examples. Again, a quote by Martin Luther King, he says, everyone can be great because everyone can serve. Everyone wants to give. Everyone wants to be related. Everyone wants to be connected. And so how do we start to do that? This is a friend of mine who actually lost his legs to polio. And he lived in a very poor part. He lived in India in a very poor community, financially poor community. And yet he had this impulse to give. And so what do we, how is he going to express this innate compassion that he has? And he discovered something remarkable, that because he walked with his legs, he would make the sound, like whenever he walked, because he would put some slippers on his hands and he walked with his hands. But because he did that, he really had a lot of trust capital. Nobody was afraid of him. Nobody was threatened by him. So people would pour their hearts out. And so he noticed that there were a lot of women who were being abused and victims of domestic violence. And they were sharing their stories with him. And he says, I want to help them. What should I do? And so he would give them these plants that he would groom himself, these holy basil plants. We call them tulsi plants in India. And he went and he offered this to them. And then next time he would go, he would sit, he would pray with them, and he would ask them, how's your plant doing? And in the span of 2 years, he gave out more than 1,500 of these tulsi plants. He created value that no one else really could have. No a government program or an NGO or a CSR budget, like you really just couldn't touch the kind of value he was creating. Because not only was he good at something, he really wanted to give his gifts. He didn't just want to monetize them. And so that's the second core insight. And that builds into a third one, which is that it's not just that we can give, but as that giving gets connected, something that the mayor spoke so eloquently on in her address earlier, that as that giving gets connected, a really deep kind of gift ecology is what we call it. This very different ecology of relationships starts to emerge, and they build on themselves. And this is not, in a way, this is something we're really all familiar with, because we see this in all wholesome families, right? We see this kind of, I don't keep track of how much my mom has done for me and how much I should pay back to my dad. There is this kind of relationship of generosity. But when this starts to get into external systems, you'd be surprised at how foreign and alien this feels like. This is Reid Hoffman. He was the founder and CEO of LinkedIn, this incredible network that perhaps all of us have heard about. But he had this quote in the Wall Street Journal that I think really embodies some of the challenges with the mainstream systems, is that social networks do best when they tap into one of the 7 deadly sins. So Facebook is ego, Zynga is sloth, and LinkedIn, which is his own company, is greed. So there's this question of, we have designed for our base aspirations, the 7 deadly sins. We do respond to them, but we also respond to our higher impulses. So who's designing for the 7 viral virtues? And this was a question that we have been holding for a while, but I think that it needs to have a lot more of us that ask this kind of question. One of our projects, one of our experiments, you can say, is this idea of karma kitchen, where you walk in to a restaurant and it's just like a regular old restaurant. These days, I suppose we can't do that. But typically, you walk into a restaurant and you have your meal, but at the end of the meal, your check at Karma Kitchen would read 0. And it's 0 because someone else before you has paid for you. And you are trusted to pay forward whatever you want for people after you. And most people are so perplexed by it, and initially it became the talk of the town where it started in Berkeley, California here. But very quickly it started to go viral, and it's now, it's been, we've had these pop-up restaurants, I think in 23 different places around the world. But what really happens, and everyone is curious, oh my God, do the finances work out? And yes, they do. Sometimes people pay more, sometimes people pay less. But on balance, it does work out. And there's actually this seminal research at UC Berkeley, and the title of that paper was Paying More When Paying for Others. But the really deep value that's created is not even the finances. It's actually what happens in a space where you walk into this space and everyone is paying for each other. And when you do that, there is this synergistic value where 1 + 1 is greater than 2 because the plus sign has value. And so how do you start to, and you see that very, very clearly. No one has to explain that to you. You walk into this place and you're like, wow, everyone is paying for each other. And it just, people behave differently. If we had more time, I could tell you so many stories of how these incredibly compelling transformations that people go through, even where there's no one person trying to transform them in that way. And this idea, of course, can be applied to anything. This is Richard Whitaker, who runs a magazine in this way. This is Thuy Nguyen, who runs her acupuncture clinic in this way. This is a rickshaw driver in India that says, hey, you sit in my rickshaw and someone you get to offer whatever you're moved to offer. And how is that made possible? Not by being some benefactor, but somebody before you with whom you're in relationship with now, even though you may not be in physical relationship. So there are lots of different expressions, but the final and the fourth sort of core insight. So let me just review the first 3 is that you start with this: everyone is good at something. And when you realize that everyone has that gift, you see that everyone can be great at that giving. We want to give. And when that generosity gets engaged at a communal level, at a larger level, we see a gift ecology. And as such gift ecologies start to blossom, a gratitude network sort of allows this very fundamental insight of interconnection, that everyone is connected to everything. Now, I come from this tech world, and so I want to show you a couple graphics of what network theorists tell us, where if you lived in the TV world, that if you're broadcasting to 50 people, you would have 50 connections. Right? One of me, what you see on TV, and 50 of you. But the telephone changed that. And now, if you just have 50 people, the telephone allowed you to connect with each other. And in a network of 50 people, Metcalfe's law tells us that you would have 1,225 connections. But what happened with the internet, which was so amazing and mind-boggling, is you started to create many-to-many networks. And so Reid's law told us that in this kind of a network, a group-forming network, where you have just 50 people, the number of connections that are possible is 100 million trillion with just 50 nodes. And so this is why you see, so many, so many paradigms just completely flipped upside down because you see this incredible value. Now, the question that we ask is, how do you apply this to compassion? We've done it for profit. We've done it for protest. But can we do this for compassion? And another way to visualize this is one to many, one to one, and many to many. And especially in times of a pandemic, we really, really understand what many to many looks like, where everyone is a carrier for all this. But now we have that virus, but we also can apply the same to virtue. So what does that look like? And here's another visualization of a centralized model to a decentralized model to completely distributed. And what you start seeing in that distributed framework is this shift from transaction, which is really powered by accumulation, to relationship. You see all these little kids on your screen, and they're all giving you a shoulder rub to the person in front of them. Now, that's not a quid pro quo, but it allows for that circulation to happen. And because of that circulation, you actually have you may give an amazing shoulder massage. You may not get such an amazing shoulder massage, but what you get is a circle, and that circle has a lot of value. And so how do you start to shift from this give and take mentality of transaction to something that's really not just direct reciprocity, but a much more indirect reciprocity? And as we do that, we have to change just our systems and the way in which we lead. We call it laddership. There's leadership and then there's laddership. But it's not just going from centralized to distributed, but also shifting our mindset to go from planning and executing. Hey, here's my 5-year plan to get there. That really doesn't work in the rapid pace of change that we are now seeing. We need to be much more agile. And leadership in that time is really all about searching and amplifying, right? Looking for patterns of positive deviance in a community, and amplifying that. The power will go from center to the edges. It's not just about the quantity of the ties, right? Oh, how many friends on your social network, but it's actually also about the depth of ties, the quality of ties. And you start to move from mere efficiency on one metric to a resiliency that allows you to actually hold a lot of failure as well. And you really go from predictability to emergence. And especially in times like these, we see the power of emergence. I want to leave you with a visual that really, really moved me. There was this photographer in Spain, I believe. He was taking photos, and he didn't even realize he took these photos. It's a murmuration of starlings. So all these birds all of a sudden realize, oh my God, like we have a giant predator that's coming our way. What should we do? And in a span of 10 seconds, they all just came together and created this incredible formation of a bird. Of a giant bird. So all these all this flock of birds are coming together and creating this giant bird in a matter of 10 seconds. And the predator then goes away, and these birds then disperse. So much so that the photographer didn't even realize he took this photo. And so I asked that question, and I leave you with that question, and I'm holding that question. What does that look like for all of us to tap into that flow? And in fact, we have one of our most recent projects started last month is this thing called coronavirus, where it's karuna is a Sanskrit word for compassion. So just as we have the physical virus, we feel that how do we respond to that with compassion and create this contagion of compassion? Because compassion is equally contagious, if not more. And you have these incredible stories of people just like those birds, just responding to the needs of the hour with great compassion, with their native, resident, instinctual compassion. that they don't even need to be taught. And so how do we start to, and we see that, and this is a website that's full of these hundreds of stories. It's very we just felt like the media was not covering any of that, the mainstream media. So we just put a collection of these, and it's updated daily. It's amazing to see. It just kind of fills your heart. But I think the question we all have to ask is how do we start to make that a part of our daily lives, daily narrative, and also create systems that amplify that. So thank you so very much for holding that space. And I know Lincoln is home to many inspiring, projects and possibilities. Like I believe Prita even holds these beautiful awaken circles that are local there. So I hope all of you get involved, and together we can create a little bit more compassion and perhaps new patterns for the coming future. So thank you very much for including me in the breakfast, and I look forward to staying connected to all of you.
In Latin, benedictus means good words. And it can be a struggle to find good words when we are all distant from each other physically. But I'm reminded more and more these days that physical distance is not spiritual distance, that social distancing need not mean isolation. Years ago, the Unitarian Universalist minister Wayne Arneson wrote, "Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone." We are not alone. We are interconnected. That has never been more fearfully or more joyfully true than right now. So take courage, friends. None of us are alone today or in the days to come. Be at peace, and amen.